Well, I will be your guide for today. uh, I'll just tell you a little bit more. How I was asked was really related to this Justice 40 initiative work that where Climate Innovation is working on with the Justice 40 Accelerator, which Chief Mann and Ramapo is part of. And let me put a link to that so you guys have a sense of what's going on with readying frontline communities to be positioned to take advantage of Justice 40 funding from the federal government. So we are part of an accelerator that has 52 cohorts in this current pilot round, readying frontline community organizations to be able to access federal funds coming out of the Biden-Harris Justice 40 initiative. I shared the link there, and I do encourage folks to look at it because we're posting if you click on the announcements at the top, we're posting federal grant opportunities every week that are that coming out of Justice 40 initiative funding. So a lot of funding out of DOE, HUD, Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, USDA, EPA. So if folks have specific questions about funding agencies, I'll try and answer those questions, but there's a lot of resources on that site. So I was kind of thinking about this as we do peer learning processes with climate innovation where if you guys are willing to trust me, I was like thinking about a format that might work so we can give some real peer-to-peer applied practice here where we're learning from each other. And what that could look like is giving each project 5 minutes to talk more in depth about their project, giving context and like where you're at in your development. If you could speak to like your current capacity, how developed is your project, if there's funding sources you're looking at. And then the group can listen and ask clarifying questions. And then we'll take 8 to 10 minutes for us to talk about your project. And that project leader just listens. And maybe if there's clarifying questions, you can answer it, but it's really an opportunity for us to discuss your project and for you to take notes and just absorb what's going on in the conversation. And then we can come back and share what you heard. Were there takeaways? Were there things that you felt like could be actionable next steps? Does that sound like a format that might work for folks? Cool. Yeah, because I definitely want to give each person the floor to talk about their project. Is there somebody that wants to start out?
I can start out.
Great.
I'll be happy to. So my name is Elliot Ruga. I'm the Policy and Communications Director to the New Jersey Highlands Coalition. And our mission and cultural resources of the New Jersey Highlands, which is very important to the state of New Jersey for its water resources. 6.2 million people in New Jersey get water from the Highlands. It has accessible and multiple outdoor recreational opportunities. It is New Jersey's reserve for biodiversity. It has tremendous value for sequestering carbon as well as filtering air. And you know, it's a constant battle to protect these resources because being in northern New Jersey, land values are constantly rising and the pressure to develop is constantly rising. Now, the core forest of the New Jersey Highlands is a 360 square mile continuous canopy forest, which most people don't really know exists because all they see are the component parts of it, like a state forest, a county park, a municipal park. They don't see it as an ecologically whole system. And the city of Newark owns 35,000 acres of this forest, a geography which is twice the size of the city of Newark itself. And very, very few people in Newark are aware of this, and even less take advantage of it. And in our call to, in our advocacy to protect this forest, we found it has really helped when we've engaged urban voices. I mean, the Highlands have traditionally supported and helped grow the major cities of northern New Jersey, such as Newark and Jersey City, by initially providing them with iron, and today providing them with water and access to the rest of these resources. So we would like to partner with groups in Newark to promote the use of um, these natural resource values that could enhance the quality of life for the citizens of Newark. And this property that is owned by Newark has been mismanaged in the past. The former executive director of the Newark Watershed and Development Corporation is, I understand, now in jail, and it is um, reverted to the city utility department. It's very opaque. There's very little information about it on the website. It is available for recreation, but very few people take advantage of it. So we have established some connections, and we are partnering with United Parks as one to apply for some initial funding to produce a film about the watershed and its offerings for distribution in the city, to help people become better aware and to arrange for trips to the watershed. Um, and we've applied for some funding, last year's Mosaic Fund, but we did not receive any funding. Um, and, we're still trying to connect with citizens groups in the city.
What's the ultimate goal of the coalition?
Well, what we'd like to see happen is the establishment of we would help establish a Friends of group, Friends of the Newark Watershed, which would be a citizens group that would be involved in the management of the property, for more than its water resources, to help provide access, to arrange for better interaction between the property and the people in the city.
Mhm. You have your hand up. Folks can just come off mute. We're a small group, but I appreciate the etiquette taking.
Okay, I was thinking of a couple of things as you were talking, and one is as I was listening to Tamira and what she was talking about of the availability of funds, and then hearing you, I was just thinking of something intergenerational. So I would question if you have approached the school system, and if not the school system, have you thought about recreation centers and there? And then also with the HUD funding that Tamira mentioned, what about the housing and approaching seniors and doing something intergenerational? Because I know there, as you said, it is opaque what is going on, and there is no transparency as far as I'm aware. And I live in Newark and am somewhat familiar with the challenges you're talking about. But I would just approach it from many. I wouldn't focus so much on one group. I would say, okay, here is an opportunity for seniors, children, teens, everybody taking advantage of this resource, and how do we acquire that? So there are several people, for example, who are heads of um, tenant associations. And you could maybe approach them and say, we have this opportunity, we want to partner with you. Would you to consider that? So I want you to keep in your head, if you can, opportunities for intergenerational visits or something that I think would really pique a funder's eye.
Yvette, you mentioned recreational organizations. Could you give me some examples?
Mm, um, well, the city has several recreation centers. As opened my mouth with that, I said no, because that reverts back to the city. And I'm thinking of Newark in particular. I don't know how other cities are formed. So let me scratch my head on that for a moment and I'll get back to you.
Okay, thanks. I
Okay.
don't necessarily, we haven't really reached out to any city representatives. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have um, a, um, a, a bad relationship with the city. I mean, I hold it out that we could have a good relationship with the city. I don't know. That's yet to be explored.
Mhm. Okay.
We are working with the co-chair of the Newark Environmental Commission. If you know Winnie Hines, she's been a good friend of ours and a big supporter of our project.
I know her well. She's a very good friend and she lives around the corner from me. So
Great.
I know her. Yeah.
She was in our first session, our first Green New Deal session, right? That, yes,
Yes.
she's very involved. That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Elliot, do you mind talking a little bit about the leadership of the coalition? Who are you all, and how long has the coalition been around? Have
The
you guys had
coalition,
other funding?
we've been around since actually 1988, but we started out as a program of the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. And it was leaders of various environmental organizations coming together to focus on protecting the Highlands, ultimately led to the passage of the Highlands Act. And in 2008, we incorporated as a nonprofit. We have a full-time staff of 5, but and a couple of contract employees beyond that. But we are a true coalition of organizations. Right now, we have 118 member organizations, and those who wish can have a say in our policy direction and meet regularly as part of our policy committee. And we're very involved in state, somewhat federal legislation, lobbying. We also do a lot of, we support grassroots efforts throughout the Highlands. And actually we have, when there have been major threats, particularly under the Christie administration, to roll back some of these protections and to weaken the Highlands Council, we have had support from Jersey City and Newark and Bayonne officially to push back on those attempts, because they understand the value of the Highlands to the quality of life in their cities.
And is the major challenge that you're looking for you're hoping this group can help is figuring out funding, or is it
Correct.
also developing some of the programs?
Because what we want to do is beyond our native capacity, ultimately. So we would need some financial support to carry this out the way to success. And one thing that has not been explored is the value of potential carbon credits for the city. for the value of this forest, which
Mhm.
is, the healthiest, most mature forest in the state.
I guess I don't know if I could just jump in just with a question, because I was just wondering about transportation from Newark to the Highlands, because I know just like most people maybe wouldn't have transportation that like their own. I'm wondering about public transportation, if it's available or if it's something to push for.
Well, there is no direct public transportation. Um, I guess from boundary to boundary, we're talking 11 miles. But from, let's say, the center of the city to a logical place to disembark in this property, it's about 17 miles. And New Jersey is not pretty terrible for public trans. Whether it's, I think, if there was any regular visitation, it would require a van or a school bus or people's automobiles.
Do other folks have ideas around like I'm hearing there's a number of opportunities here, and I know that this is a very constrained format to articulate some of the access and yeah, equity issues around accessing open space is
Sure.
is a big reality everywhere, but especially on the East Coast. As well, that's the Justice 40 initiative criteria is looking at how, nature deficit disorder is a real thing. Access to communities to open space is a real thing. But beyond that, the ultimate goal is to protect this watershed, for folks to value it for what it is and protect it, and really to activate people's sense of ownership around it so it doesn't continue
Correct.
to be mismanaged kind of like behind doors. It blows my mind that the city hasn't figured out how to get carbon credits for a 35,000 acre forest, but maybe that's something no one's really pressured them to do. And it would mean more eyes on how they're
Right.
on their management practices. So that's one avenue, but also this is a public asset, and these are public funds being used on a public access. So there does need to be accountability. There does need to be a sustained community led process around how the city is using and making decisions about it. And I wonder if that's also an avenue of like seeking out funding and support on community-led design for the forest. I don't know what management plans they're using or how decisions are being made, but really bringing it into the public.
Yeah. And there is the issue with lead in the water once it's locally distributed, but the water leaving the Pequannock watershed is some of the cleanest in the country. It's so unfortunate that it is corrupted the way it is, because Newark 120 years ago had such foresight in purchasing the amount of land they purchased. There is so much forest buffering their 5 water supply reservoirs that very little money needs to go into bringing that water up to drinking water standards. Whereas the Jersey City system, the banks of the Rockaway River that feed the Boonton Reservoir, there are state highways and golf courses and backyards and parking lots. In the end, the cost of water in Newark is half the price of the cost of water in Jersey City because it's so clean.
Hey, Anthony, I wonder if you want to chime in here as the Newark Water Coalition representative.
Yeah, I had several thoughts. The first thought on funding, what I've seen, especially from foundations recently, is that they are looking for a grassroots element. So if there are plenty of grassroots organizers or organizations in your coalition, I would tap them and co-write some or co-author some grants with them, and you're more than likely to get it. Most foundations want to fund, especially after the George Floyd movement, more local communities. So tying in like an organization like ours, the Newark Water Coalition, with yours, I think it makes a lot of sense. The other thing, just based off of kind of where we're at as an organization, something that actually we're going to work on tomorrow at our meeting is this is rewriting our list of demands, because as the water issue has changed, one of the things we realized as an organization, like, you know, first it was about like the water that's coming out of our faucet and the lead pipes. But then we began to think about, what about our reservoirs? What about the Passaic River? When we talk about, you know, water is life or fighting for clean water, what does it mean? And especially now since I've come out of Glasgow, is looking at environmentalism on a global scale and understanding that, you know, just because our cities and towns have these kind of, you know, fictional and imaginary borders, but, you know, environmental injustices don't. They stem all over the place. And again, especially coming out of the international space, is realizing how water problems are going to be a problem in the future. And if we are not taking proactive steps now, it's going to be a problem. I mean, it's definitely going to be a problem. So I think, one, I would be interested in obviously working in collaboration with you and figuring out the funding mechanisms. And then two, figuring out how to tie both of our communities together. Something that, you know, that I've been doing with Chief Man is taking our volunteers up to the farm. We are hoping to source all of our vegetables to our food pantries and community fridges. But again, it's like, you know, it's not a separation of communities. It's just like, how are we all in this together? So I think that there's a lot of overlap between the Highlands Coalition and the Newark Water Coalition.
Well, I'll take that as an invitation, Anthony. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you know, we work closely with the Passaic River Coalition. They're a member of the coalition as well. And Lori, we'd love to engage you as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
Geographically, you're the conduit between us.
Yes.
Physically.
Yep.
Well, I don't want to take more
Yeah.
time. There are other organizations that need to
Yeah, I'm
speak.
wondering if Lori or Anthony, you want to talk, and also, you know, with this bipartisan infrastructure bill that just passed, there's going to be billions of dollars being allocated to infrastructure projects that flow down to city and local state government. And I wonder, I don't know if any of you have a working relationship with the city of Newark resource agency to be thinking about what projects they're priming for those funds. Like, this is all going to happen fairly quickly. And there's, you know, those communities that are positioned well are going to get big projects, which could be great, or it could be just exacerbate the harm that's been done to underinvested communities, where projects happen without true community input and without true community impact being truly seen and heard. So I'm wondering how you might be positioning yourselves with this for around infrastructure dollars that are coming in.
I can add to that. I
Right.
think many of the funds will be used for the combined sewer overflow projects. I don't know if you're aware of that for Newark. And actually many communities, 20 municipalities up through the Passaic, up through Patterson. They're all on top of, I know Newark is on top of that for sure. Some of the others not as much, but that has been a great focus, which is when I get to my project. But we're going to look at something else, because the focus has been very much on combined sewer overflows, which is mandated by EPA years ago. They have to do it. And they're talking billions. And right now they're deciding how they're going as a group. Are they going to do it together or individual municipalities to get those funds? That's what I can add to that.
Yeah. Do you want to just get into your project and what the opportunity?
Sure. Well, I'm Lori Howard from the Passaic River Coalition. I'm the executive director. And we've been around since 1969 for the river, focusing on the pollution in the lower Passaic. We're all about improving water quality, protecting the water supplies, access to the river for recreation, and educating the public about anything water. And our project actually is a little different because I don't think anybody's aware that there are absolutely no approved DEP, EPA watershed plans in the Passaic River Basin, particularly in the urban areas. They don't exist. They used to have them 30 years ago. They don't have any. So, and it's a lot, no attention has been really given to them, we think, because, and they've been very damaged and neglected for too long, the urban watersheds, by development that has eliminated natural habitats and watershed functions, by storm erosion, insufficient stream flows, water pollution, channelization, and placement in culverts and underground channels. In fact, DEP ceased giving grants for this way back when, but apparently they're bringing them back now, which may be a source of funding. So we thought that we would like to look at the sub-watersheds of the lower Passaic, particularly in the urban areas that warrant plans and improvements. But we would want to engage the communities basically, and that's one of the problems is that there's a lack of knowledge about how, Anthony, as you described, what are we talking about? I'm talking about the Third River, Branch Brook Park, all these water sources. They're very neglected as far as pollution and how that contributes to the community. People don't know about it. That's a challenge. So our idea is to restore the stream quality and ecosystems for distressed communities. Maybe pick one or two for starters on the lower Passaic, use that as a model, and then go on. But we're looking for collaborative partnerships in addition to funding for that. And what do I mean by that? For example, you could plant riparian trees that benefits the water quality and reduces urban heat island effects. I mean, we would look into all of that for particular localities. And we broke out a few areas. Branch Brook Park, a stream there, the Second River in Newark and Belleville, the Third River in Bloomfield, Clifton has Weasel Brook, Patterson has Slippery Rock Brook. And these are all communities that are really not even aware of these streams and how it affects their water quality. So that's kind of where we want to go. But as I said, we do think there's going to be some money available, and that we hope to learn about it in the next few months, actually.
I'll just put a link up that has a number of FEMA grants that are out now. Flood mitigation, but there's going to be a lot of.
Well, that exactly, and that fits in with this as well. We address that. But I think really to get the communities involved, it's not so easy. It involves a lot of education beforehand, I think. And I think in the old days, it was kind of very paternalistic. Everybody came down, or DEP, oh, we're going to do this and that. We would like to change that and create improvements and contribute to the big improvements of the super funds. That's all in the works. Everybody's very focused on that and the combined sewers, but here we have these other tributaries that no one's really paying attention to and could really benefit the communities.
Have you all, are you guys set up to apply for federal funding?
Yes, we have in the past. I will say Passaic River Coalition, we have had some major transitions and our capacity is low, which is why we would seek funding. We would like to take the lead, partner with others.
Yeah.
The municipalities, county, whoever, but again, more, not even that, even more local groups. We can bounce
Lori,
off some, yeah.
Is there a watershed ambassador for the lower Passaic?
Yeah, right now, you mean Ashley, one of those people? Yes, I work with them. Yes, Ashley
Okay.
Smith.
Okay, just curious.
But, you know, they change, those ambassadors change on a yearly basis, pretty much.
But I find they're usually good conduits to.
Oh, they are,
community
absolutely.
organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we can bounce off of the combined sewer, involved with that, with the sewage-free streets and rivers. We focused more on Patterson right now, which is really where we're seeing the great need for education, actually. So that's what I have.
Do folks have questions for Lori or ideas?
And we're also documenting flooding areas specifically from residents. We're already.
We train youth to be do climate resilience mapping in the community. So they
Oh.
actually went out and looked at tree coverage, flooding, energy, low energy zones, surface coverage, all these things. So they begin to be the
Well, actually, I should add that we're actually working with Passaic STEM program with the high school. Unfortunately, I don't know if you're aware that 2 of their recent graduates died in Ida flooding.
Yeah.
And in part of their healing, when they met, the students decided they want to look into flooding mitigation and what they could do to restore their community. And we're waiting actually from a grant. We're working with the high school on that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, schools are public property. They're the biggest landowner in the U.S. If these are actual demonstration places that you could, do some flood mitigation projects on some school sites and get the school district involved too. But also education. I'm assuming you mean around what climate impact looks like and what climate resilient building and climate resiliency could look like. And there's lots of opportunities partnering and creating some demonstration projects. And
there we actually found some private funding, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I have a question, sorry to chime in. So when you're looking into flooding areas, are you also looking into where are these areas located, and if there might be some contamination impact that has moved?
Yes.
Okay.
And the flooding has changed. In fact, that's what happened in Passaic. They were rather shocked.
Yes.
Yeah,
I live in Clifton, so
yes. And Clifton, and that's the community is a little different. Now they understand it more, I think, a little bit than before. There were places that had never had water, and now it does. So we need to get in there.
Yes, so that's I work at NJIT. I'm a researcher here, a professor, and one of the things that I'm looking into is the transport of contaminants. And after I was shocked, because if I would have known, I would have been ready to go and collect samples and look at the transport of these pollutants. But really was surprised, so I really didn't react, and that's something that I would like to be prepared for. Next storm that is coming, to really go and study that transport and how that is going to impact our communities, because obviously that's what.
But do you find that the municipality doesn't really respond to that?
Yeah,
that's where the difficult part is. Since I know Clifton, and I do too, a little bit. And that's kind of a block, if you will. Which is why I think the STEM programs going into the schools may help to get to more voters, if you will.
Yes.
I think they're so used to running their operations folks. They're running a water system, running sewers. They're not thinking about externalities and impacts and beyond. I mean, most municipalities it's very hard for them to think beyond operation. And I want to throw another thing out there that Environmental Protection Network is all retired career EPA employees who are forming an alumni association to help with communities developing projects, whether it be monitoring projects or policy, to help think about it, especially around monitoring. As I was just talking to them this morning, developing monitoring programs and collecting the kind of data that can actually be used by the EPA and state regulatory agencies to make change happen. So we all have gone out and done like citizen science stuff, but if you want to develop, it's a pro bono like matchmaking service.
Thank you.
Yeah, they have 550 retired EPA
Wow.
Staff who volunteer to help with projects like this, and you just need to connect with them through their website.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, especially when you start to talk about monitoring and collecting novel data sets to try and influence local city government around especially water issues, because it's such a, I mean, that's 100% Justice 40 related funding. But, and it's all, I mean, the infrastructure bill that's coming, I mean, most of these cities are not going to know what to do with this.
Very true.
Yeah. Do we want to move to another project? I mean, we're on the topic of water, Anthony. I don't know if you want to share more about your project, and then make sure we're leaving time.
Well, we always have 1,000,000,001 projects going on. I think the one I put for the Accelerator program was our leadership school, which, thanks to Miss Jordan, was the initial seed money. And then we've gotten, I think, 2 more grants to start an organizing school for the Newark Border Coalition. One of the things that I've seen, especially in the environmental justice space, is that it's a lot of white people. And even as an organizer before, I was focused on tenant rights, police brutality, those kinds of issues, and not the environment. And it wasn't until, the focus began with the Newark Border Coalition that I realized, wow, climate is the preemptive issue of our time, especially coming out of Glasgow, realizing that when we talk about climate, what we really are doing is fighting for humanity, because the planet is going to exist whether we're on it or not. And so we want to be on it, obviously, but we need to make sure that frontlines communities are at the forefront of this. And something that Lori was talking about earlier is the education aspect of it. And it's like, how do we begin to take these larger picture, conversations, especially on the international level, and scale it down and disseminate the information and understand, or tell our communities that this definitely affects us on a hyper local level. And one of those things is, just like you said, is the dollars that are coming into the city. Now, my question, and where I've pushed back the EPA on always, is where do those dollars go? Who is going to be a part of the solution? Who's going to be left out? And so if we're training up new organizers to fight and to be educated in all of these realms, then they'll have a bigger picture, understanding, and then we're building like the next generation up. Now, the thing that I run into trouble too often is, we are working on our 501c3 status. We don't have it. We're a fiscally sponsored project. So that eliminates us from some of the grant funding. And what I'm also finding is that there are very few long-term funds. So like multi-year funding is always tends to be an issue for us. And then the third thing I always push back on donors with is unrestricted funds. Like, you're going to tell me how to solve the problem, but why are you giving me this money anyway if you're going to tell me I can only use it for certain things? So like, those are kind of the roadblocks that I've run into. We've been super, super blessed recently, but I'm always thinking long-term. We just fortunately are gonna sign an office space soon. And we think that that's gonna build out our programming and allow us to do more things. But again, just looking for the resources. And then for the citizen science aspect, we just signed a kind of a thing with our MOU with UC Berkeley. And what we want to do is the state of New Jersey has this Water Watch website, which is like really outdated. I don't know if anybody's ever used it before, but it's like really outdated, and it just doesn't even look nice. And then there's always funny stuff that goes on with those numbers. So we want to create our own independent, verified Water Watch website, starting with testing the water in Newark from homes and things like that. And UC Berkeley is going to have an IRB with us and help us navigate through the process so we can release our own academic journal. And we're always looking for funding on that project as well.
Can they partner on funding with you? Can they be an
Yes.
advocate? Mhm.
Well, it's more of like the testing, the labs, using the certifications, the RRB, and then like some small funding. I think the project isn't that much. I think it's 50,000. But it's what we want to do is make sure that one of the biggest expenditures of that project is a mobile testing bus. So we would be able to pull up to different communities, different blocks, and just test their water right then and there. But it looks like we are going to get funding for that bus. But again, it's a roadblock. I don't like to count my eggs before they hatch.
Mhm. Did you guys apply to the Justice 40 Accelerator?
I think I did, but I've learned, because usually it's me that's writing the grants. So I've learned that I learned that the whole grant process is a sham, but not only that, but I understand that certain organizations want to hear certain things, but that's not every organization. Every organization or foundation wants to hear different things. Some people focus on metrics, some people want to hear the story. So it gets a little like I'm not a Black minstrel trying to play my sob story for everybody, and that frustrates me, and I know that eliminates funding sometimes, but at the same time, depending on where I'm at in the project, it also depends on like how strong of an application we submit. And I don't think my application was that strong for Justice 40 in the past, to be honest.
Well, we had 320 applications with really poorly advertised grant opportunity. So that should tell you something that, there's definitely a need for like the accelerator type support to help projects navigate an inherently flawed system. Like, we all recognize that Justice 40 is not reparations. It is a drop in the bucket to address what communities have had to endure for centuries. So the federal funding process looks like the economic inequality that we have everywhere. It's deeply flawed. And what we're trying to do is help ready communities to access these funds, knowing that they are hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. Like, some organizations just shouldn't apply for federal funding. It would be like the end of them because of the administrative burden, because of the reporting requirements, all of it. So what we're also looking at is other capital opportunities and using the accelerator to raise visibility to these projects, and also say back to the feds, like, this isn't getting where it should go, and it's not going to anytime soon until you change the way you fund projects and structure these opportunities. These are public funds. These are our dollars. We shouldn't be having to jump through hoops to get services out of the government that we've paid for. So that's just like a backdrop in the context of where we know we're coming from. But I did have a question, just a practical question about, is your fiscal sponsor able to receive public funds on your behalf? Yeah. I would say if they weren't, then you should go look for a new fiscal sponsor, because there's lots of them out there that can manage reimbursable grants for you. And
so it's because of our project that they became eligible for that, because what we got some grant funding this year that required them to go get all the paperwork that they needed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be good to explore what bigger opportunities might mean for them. So if you were to apply for a FEMA or an EPA grant, that was significant, you know, what impact that would have on them. And I will say too, there's lots of funders who are all about subverting the paradigm. And I love what Tobias and Chief Mann said, is like, community is everything. Just like, remember who you're accountable to. It's not to funders, it's not to the government, it's to your community. So like, keep telling the story, celebrate your accomplishments. I love that. Like, art is a universal language. Use whatever means you have to, you know, keep telling your community story, and the right opportunity will come along. Looks like we're gonna need to switch to the other breakout, or maybe I'm just switching to the other breakout.
I'll remain with this group. You switch.
Okay.
And then when you get over there, just tell Scott.
So I
to-
didn't have an opportunity to share.
Yeah,
That's
Yvette's
fine.
going up next. I think we still have a half hour for these breakout sessions.
We do. So with
Okay.
that, maybe what we can do is when Scott comes over, you can be the first to share with him. And then what we can also do in the Q&A, the last session, is we can make sure we have time for you to address questions to Tamira, okay? So that you can get that communication through. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my contact with everybody. It's just Tamira@movementstrategy.org. I'm here if folks have questions. we have a lot of like federal grant readiness assessment tools. If folks are like interested in those resources, I'm happy to share those.
With that, I'll make sure you get time with Tamira.
Thank you all.
Hi, Tamira. Bye, Tamira.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can I just ask folks to go around once and say who you are, and if you're with the group, who it is? And,
Tamira, you have to switch yourself. There
very
you go.
good. All right. Very good. Elliot, you want to lead off?
Sure. I'm Elliot Ruga. I'm the Policy and Communications Director at the New Jersey Highlands Coalition.
Thank you. Lori?
Lori Howard, Executive Director of the Passaic River Coalition.
Terrific. Anthony?
Anthony Diaz, co-founder of the Newark Water Coalition.
Very nice to meet you. Yvette?
Yvette Jordan, Chairperson, Newark Education Workers Caucus.
Right. And is it Lucia or Lucia?
Hi, it's Lucia. That's okay. Hi, I'm Lucia Rodriguez Freire. I'm an assistant professor in New Jersey Institute of Technology and Environmental Engineering.
Very nice to meet you. Randy, we can't see you.
Hi, I'm just the tech person here. It's fine.
Most important person here. And Alex and I work together all the time. So very good. Did you guys come to any sharpening of program ideas in the first half of this? And if so, who wants to tell me where we're at so we don't have to go over the same ground again, and I can pick up at a good point?
Well, I think we had, except we sort of left Yvette not have an opportunity to talk about her project and her concerns.
Well, let's let Yvette go first then, and then somebody can follow her with a summary of the other things that people talked about. Take it away, Yvette.
Okay. Have to calm down first. All right. I'm Yvette Jordan, as I said. I'm the chairperson of New Caucus, and a little background. New Caucus is was the plaintiff in the federal and state lawsuit against city of New Jersey for the water crisis. So through that, we learned several things, and most importantly, that the community was not poised to rise up and speak out about what is happening or what happens in their community. So we see this over and over and over again. However, in a public health crisis, it is just really, really strong. So we as educators more or less said, okay, we will speak for you. However, we don't want to do that forever, right? So the project I submitted was about training the trainer and training the community to use their voice and rise up. And especially in this atmosphere where opportunities, albeit small in some cases, are rising up. And opportunities, I'm talking about the Green New Deal, I'm talking about the infrastructure bill, I'm talking about all of these initiatives, and hopefully the Build Back, Better plan, if that bill ever comes to fruition. So the idea of New Caucus is how do we empower the community and residents, and how do we partner with other organizations so that they can understand the power in their voice. So that is basically it. I know it's simple, however, if it happens, it can be powerful.
That's really good. And do you have an idea of how you would be better funded to do that? I mean, I'm familiar with the issue. I was in town during the fall of 2019 when you were going to town with all of this very impressive mobilization work, clear messaging, lots of controversy on whether the city was moving fast enough or not. You probably have an opinion on the quality of the job done to date on the issue. And I'll give away one of my punchlines. There is money in the infrastructure bill, the part that was approved, both for lead service line pipe replacement and for creating lead free schools, both.
Right.
And so I think you got an opportunity there. I think you've also put your finger on an issue, which is that there isn't a federal program labeled mobilization or community organization building or leadership development. There are programs to improve the quality of public participation in federal funding, though, and to do planning and to improve the quality of public engagement in that planning. And I guess my question is, if this was a matter of meeting those federal and state must-haves, do you think that there's people who would roll up their sleeves and put the right front end on your project so that you could qualify for the work that you say needs
When
to
you
happen?
say people, are you talking about funders? Are you talking about other CBOs? What are you talking about when you say?
Well, if you have a community-based network and you have members that want to see change happen, and I'll bet you need money to do that. Do you see a pathway whereby if funding was made available through the same channels that's going to pay for the actual work that needs to get done, to pay for continued mobilization and education, that you'd participate in that funding and receiving that funding? Or do you think you need to do something else in order to fund the work of the caucus?
No, I don't think, and I don't think that is a problem. And let me backtrack a bit, because in the winter of 2018, Newark Water Coalition was birthed, and that birth really came out of the water crises and how so many organizations and people felt it necessary to come together, and it wasn't all about New Caucus. So this Newark Water Coalition is, in my view anyway, a perfect organization who would, since we kind of, I don't want to say we gave birth to it, but we were there and a part of the genesis of it. So I see them as a natural partner in this.
Anthony, can I ask you the same question then? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah,
Could you see, let's say that there is a ton of money coming New Jersey's way, labeled healthy water for everybody, just for the sake of argument. It's more complicated than that, but and there's a number of portals that are available for that funding to go through, and some of those are clearly about actually getting the work done, right? I mean, replacing lead service lines and any other lead risks in the water distribution system. There's the issue, I understand, that of other sources that may be making their way in as far upstream as the Wanakee Reservoir, if I have that right. And third, there's other sources of lead in public buildings, such as schools. And so, the majority of them is probably going to get spent on contracting to actually accelerate any of that work that still needs to get done. But there's other money related to it that has to get spent on planning, on public engagement, on public education, on workforce development and training that could be considered a potential community benefit out of all this. There'd be a lot of people employed for the foreseeable future, making this vision happen. So how do you see the Water Coalition's role here? Is it simply in continuing to call for accountability on the use of those funds, or do you also see a hands-on role in some of the functions that I just described?
The issue is never the actual work. Like one of the things is like we want to do the actual work. The problem is that obviously these are all government agencies that are funding this and are going to receive these monies from the federal government. Now, the problem with the Newark Water Coalition is because we've been so critical and we've been holding folks accountable that we are never involved in any of those conversations. And I'm very open and honest and transparent about the organizations that do, such as Clean Water Action, and then they fall through the cracks in terms of actually reaching out to community members. So where oftentimes we would be perfect for this type of funding and this type of work, we're left out of the conversation because we're a community-based organization that has been so critical. So what we tend to rely on are partners like a New Caucus or NJIT or other coalitions that have institutional support to say, no, you should give the funding to this group, because this group is the one that does the work. But I don't have any dreams of us actually receiving any of these federal funds, because I know how this game is working. I've already seen it play out.
Am I frozen or okay?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
So it sucks because we could do a lot. We could do a lot with this money. But I definitely think that in partnering with institutions such as NJIT, Rutgers, New Caucus, or other people, that there is an opportunity for us, but I don't count my eggs before they hatch. So I'm not counting on these federal dollars making it to organizations like the Newark Water Coalition. So we'll always be, able to comment and try to fight for it. But, I try to be realistic and practical.
I just want to comment very briefly about what you said, Anthony, because number one, I agree with you, but also without casting aspersions on any other organization much. Oh, we're recording. Shh. I do want to say that I've had some opportunities and speaking with the EPA Assistant Administrator in a meeting with several other organizations about what is happening in terms of the infrastructure bill and how it's being rolled out. And this was a couple of weeks ago, we had this meeting. She is acutely aware of certain CBOs, certain organizations, especially BIOC organizations, or you know what I mean, Black, Indigenous, people of color are being omitted from the process. So thankfully, I was sitting there at that table and was one of the presenters. But what happens is that so many people are omitted. So if we partner and this is a perfect opportunity for us doing so, as well as with other groups, we can help more people who are traditionally left out.
So anybody else want to jump in on this?
Yeah.
My experience, by the way, I've done this for 42 years. I ran a coalition in Chicago, and we raised a lot of money in Chicago, and I chaired several coalitions in DC, and we've been through this before with the feds. But whether you're going after foundations or individual contributors or a federal or state agency that's getting money from the feds, and you're in that situation too right now, you know, people at the end of the day do want to buy outcomes. They don't want to just buy, we gave the money away. And they don't want to just write, you know, a good press release isn't, we gave a contract to so-and-so. They, you know, they want to hear that people got healthy, that the risk was removed, that the community benefits really happened. So I'm sure you guys have some aspirations here and fantasies about what a good outcome might look like. And if you could just sort of say a little bit more about what this kind of partnership you both talked about might make possible, I think we could be helpful even in this short time and later in helping sharpen up some requests for resources that could help that cause. So say just a little bit more.
Anthony, given our organization's interest that the water that leaves the Pequannock watershed ends up clean at the tap of the users in Newark, could we help you access funds? We're a fiscal sponsor to several organizations, and we're very committed to promoting grassroots advocacy. So we should talk some more.
Absolutely. I will send you my contact information. Or actually, I'll just put it in the chat.
And Yvette, is there a way to bring in the educators and the students into that coalition? I mean, to bring all three of you together, you know what I mean?
Yeah. We should talk, Elliot, if that's okay. Okay.
It's very
Well,
good.
thank you for stepping up and saying you would be willing to do that. That's phenomenal. Yeah.
I mean, I would see not only getting the children, the students to travel up there to use the outdoor recreational resource, but using it as a pedagogical teaching tool to teach them about the ecosystem, to teach them about clean water, to teach them where their water comes from, to teach them about the problems in Newark and how they're related to the problems up, you know, in Elliot's area. It's just a perfect educational, you know, aspect to, you know, tying, you know, Anthony and Elliot together, right?
Mhm.
The students are going back and forth and learning about both ends of that ecosystem. It could be really wonderful.
Yeah.
And Lori, you're in the middle, right? So it's all
From a power analysis point of view, if you're both in the same watershed and sharing the same drinking water supply and the same major outdoor assets, I know if I was the EPA administrator, I would be coming to you looking to see what your appetite was to do some sort of nationally significant discretionary project. He's got the same problem. Michael Regan. He's got more money than they've ever had to spend before, but he's got to spend it well. And he's also got to meet this Justice 40 commitment in the president's executive order that says that 40% of the benefits go directly to frontline disadvantaged communities. And that's something they haven't had to do before either. And there's sort of a weak theory and a strong theory about that. The weak theory is left to their own devices, a bunch of economists in the back room plugging X billion dollars into a model and saying, see, we got several million jobs out of it for the right kinds of people. And, you know, the strong theory would say that it's strengthened community-based and regional economies. It taught people to work together. They'll be more ready for the next crisis when it happens. If people got employed, they were the very people that we care about, and we could actually measure the increase in health outcomes that came from doing this. You know, on that last one, the measured results, you would need help, I think, from the universities, and I'll bet you they're willing to roll up their sleeves on this one because they rarely get the opportunity to partner like this and do that kind of direct measurement.
Lucia, do you have anything to say about that? What Scott just said, the university, participation? And Scott, my question for you is: do you see this as like a watershed project that could come together with everyone who's here right now? Like, does that make it more powerful, more apt to be funded, or not? Or
let me put it this way: there's a whole lot of money for which you could not do that because it's siloed by program, and the people who have to deal with lead poisoning through water distribution aren't the people that are dealing with public health. But when it comes to ecosystem health, EPA way back in the 90s in the Clinton administration defined community-based and place-based projects as being when it came to water issues anyway, based around watersheds. So they actually have a framing at EPA that makes it more possible to get things done when there is a vibrant watershed partnership. And that's for existing money, not just for new money. I'll just say that as well. And you'll hear me say it at the end of the day too. We got we got the one bill that got passed earlier this year, the American Rescue Plan. And only 40% of the money that came to New Jersey as of September got spent so far. So there's money sitting on the table and frankly at risk of going back from that one. Then you've got these two bills, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the infrastructure bill that signed, sealed, and delivered. And you got the bill that the House passed this morning, Build Back Better, and some version of it, I'm betting, will pass the Senate. And then you got this other little thing called the budget of the United States of America, which is everything else. And that will pass. I mean, by January, all this will be gift wrapped and you're going to have like 4 trains running at once. And probably not a single person in the whole public interest community in the state of New Jersey who has a full-time job tracking and translating this money. We may do this through the Price Institute at Rutgers if just help people keep track of this better and get some accountability. But there's money that is more possible to get, to answer your question, Neil, if it does deal with fundamental ecosystem health. And I would think that people would want to learn about that.
And you also mentioned that, collection of data and information is important. And I didn't know if, Lucia, that was something that you felt comfortable talking about, or because Scott, you mentioned it's pretty important, right? I don't know.
It's important. Some of it could only be done by trained researchers and, preferably at universities or research centers. Some of it is very friendly to what's called citizen science.
Right.
We've talked before, New Jersey has a tremendous network, for example, of trained weather spotters that complement the National Weather Service, and it works so well the federal government actually helps fund people to be part of it. I suspect that the water system has similar complexity. I know for a fact that when I looked for the hyperlocal data on water quality in 2019, when the issue came up at Price, there wasn't hyperlocal data on water quality. There wasn't the same sort of citizen science going on when it came to measuring the quality of the water people were drinking. And I just been through this in Flint, Michigan, with a similar process, and they ended up setting something like that up there. So yeah, at various levels. What do you think, Lucia?
So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for universities to participate. The main one on data collection and analysis is precisely that. One of the most expensive things that we have to pay for is labor. So if the communities take ownership, for saying, in a way, of collecting samples, and then we analyze them and we can train and help and create kits and organize these sampling events that will help immensely, and we can analyze those samples and organize data, and obviously send this data analysis back to the communities and translate that. But I also think for this infrastructure, and going back to what we were discussing on flooding events and combined wastewater systems, there's so much that still has to be done. And I just talked last week in a workshop, seminar, listening session that was organized by the National Academy of Engineers, precisely talking about global events and global changes. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that we have been retrofitting our water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants for many years, but it's not working. We have seen that. We are seeing that when Ida hit, there was sections of New Jersey that were without water, clean water, for many weeks. After that one in Clifton, next to the just like 2 roads down the road, I will be without water for 4 weeks because of the source water was impacted by the storm. So we have water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants that were designed 100 years ago, and there's not really have been much change. So maybe it's time to start building new things with everything that we have learned in the last 100 years since it started. We also have seen that every time there's a change in water quality, there's issues with lead in drinking water that is coming after that. So it's very hard to control. It's better to have a standard and reliable drinking water system that will protect our communities. So that's something that we think, and I have been thinking and trying to strategize a few proposals precisely to, okay, what is that we are going to do next? We cannot start building and rebuilding on top of what is old. We have to go back. We see in our drinking water systems, yes, we remove the lead service lines, and then we have other sources of lead that is still an issue. So how can we say that we are lead free if we are not sure? And in that case, I think that those funds, that money has to go to the communities so that they can actually replace and not just parts and pieces of their drinking water system, drinking water distribution system, but the entire system and rebuild. So yes, I have been thinking many things, projects, and trying to see what we can do here. And I'm talking on just one of the faculty at NJT that is working in water issues and community, but there's many people that are looking at water treatment, water distribution systems, community impact, and we are trying to see what we can do next. And we're still overwhelmed with everything and all the new information and possibility of funding. I've just started 4 years ago as an assistant professor, so I have not been 100% successful with all the proposals that I have sent. So I also struggle in getting funds and money and getting things done, but we're working, and I will be happy to collaborate, support if you need a support letter or analysis. We have some capabilities at NJT that will be.
That's terrific, Lucia. Just an observation, water bills in the United States, and this includes New Jersey, are going up faster than energy bills now. And the principal reason is that the thing that's called the water bill is where stormwater management, systems replacement, such as you just spoke of, and other such investments end up where the cost of settlements with EPA ends up. And unlike when the situation when energy utility bills go up for electricity or gas, PSEG by order of your BPU negotiates along with the state and energy master plan every few years, and money is increasingly devoted to things that will reduce the cost of energy bills. It doesn't seem like anybody's doing that work in New Jersey right now. No single organization is devoted to creating those programs. In the energy case, they end up, once they get established, those programs end up with partnerships with community-based organizations to train people to do the work, to get them hired, to do the citizen science and monitoring in some cases, to make sure that it's working. And I'll just say a lot of the money that's coming through the sources that I mentioned are for programs that will be not only for the direct environmental benefits, but for these co-benefits, for community benefits, things that will improve the economy, lower poverty, increase employment. You got a 27% poverty rate, which you know better than I do. That's the average in Newark, and it's higher in certain communities. I would think there's an opportunity here, not only to get accountability on replacing systems and so forth, but to make sure that the benefits that do occur are directly as possible experienced within those communities as well. And I'll just say that if I was your advocate or your program officer at the foundation, or an assistant to the administrator of EPA, and I heard a proposal that had components not only for a settlement on fixing an old treatment plan, which is something I have to deal with every day, but on actually creating this stream of never-ending co-benefits for employment, cost of living, health, and so forth happening, I'd put that one on the top of the pile. And you guys could be leaders on that. Who else do you need to partner with to make it include those kinds of benefits as well, I guess is the question. Or do you need to figure that out? So. I'll just say this, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. You're not Flint, but you got as much notoriety as Flint did out of your organizing nationally. And so nobody's going to be surprised if in a meeting at the White House, somebody pops up and says, well, what did we do for Newark? All right, they're just not. And, your mayor's pretty aggressive on this front. He's got a profile too. I think, and recently at least, part of the Newark Recovery Plan says they're going to partner with neighborhood-based organizations on the economic development side, but it doesn't say that on the environment or the infrastructure side. So I would think creating some sort of forum to get some agreement to make sure the partnership could actually deliver what you're looking for would be really smart. Make it more likely to get funded.
You said create a forum. What are you talking?
Well, tell people you're interested in this bigger vision happening. You've been
they
at
know
this,
that.
yeah, but it hasn't happened yet, right? And now all of a sudden there's all this money coming in. But I don't see a lot of evidence that people are ready to make things happen faster just because there's more money coming in. In my travels around the country, at the end of the day, a lot of this money is going into systems and places where there's already agencies, they do their thing their way. I've gotten very sensitive working with Chief Mann and the Lenape tribe to the fact that they've been at it for 50 years on that Superfund situation over there, and they're not going to last another 50 years unless they get something happening very different. You don't want to have to be, 2 generations of descendants still dealing with it. Although I believe you, Lucia. These problems have a way of popping up again and again. I don't think there's a magic bullet here, but I do think I've seen transit lines get built in 2 years, and I've seen identical transit lines get built in 25 years. So which one would you want to have if you were advocating for a transit line? And you got a similar situation here with the cleanup of your infrastructure and greening it up and getting something that's a little bit better too. So I would just think you you got an opportunity here. That's what I mean by a forum.
So you're suggesting, Scott, that there's a project right here
Yeah.
involving these organizations.
Yep.
And we're really from the headwaters to the tap.
Yep.
We're a whole system.
That might even
Okay.
be the name, might even be a name of your
Okay.
project, the headwaters to the tap system, cleaning up the Passaic River watershed for everybody, or something like that.
You know, put a project together. I was just thinking of this EPA 2 grant. It comes out, I think, every couple of years. I mean, I'm sure it'll be different when it comes out next time. But in order to apply for the grants, like I remember I was actually applying with some other organizations. They have, you know, the ability of different budgets, and like the highest budget, there's a requirement that you have to partner. So I think you have to partner with 5 people. And so I think also with what Anthony was saying, like that he's having troubles dealing with certain folks, like giving them fundings. But if you go in perhaps as like the 5 people, you know, as that coalition, as Scott is suggesting, that would, you know, you'd be part of the project. And then, but I'm wondering if like, because this opportunity is December 5th. So, I mean, that's difficult to like get something out right there. But I wonder if you could talk to the people just so they know, and they'll be ready. You'll be ready when something comes out, like this comes out again, because it has like every element that you talked about, you know, and in terms of education, getting the communication out, building mentorship, like all of that's in there. And then I was just thinking also about the stormwater. I mean, that's just so important for their everyday lives, and thinking about the education of that too. So just like everything is like perfect for this grant. I'm just thinking.
Right. Well, December 5th is hard, obviously. But,
Yeah, but
there's a number of new titles. EPA's community, state and local grants program is going to have $1 billion, for example. And every state is required by congressional action to have at least one grantee. So, you know, New Jersey can't say, well, we don't do that one, right? It's just, so, you know, they'll have to deal with things a little bit differently. I think what we can do, Alex, is help people navigate this a little bit. You know, I'm not bragging. I was once on a White House commission where the President Clinton, Vice President Gore said, "You're our Council on Sustainable Development. You can recommend anything you want as long as it's within our authority to spend money on, because we're not Congress and we can't print money," right? So there's like this dead silence. And I asked the question, can you tell us what you do have the authority to do? Which kind of chuckle. But then Gore said, great idea. And he appointed a multi-agency task force to work with us. And we figured out what they already had the authority to do. And a whole lot of money got spent, even though the newspapers were saying Congress isn't doing anything. So there's no money. So I think that you're in a similar kind of situation here, where there are these new federal pots of money, very few of which are written directly for the purposes you're talking about, that are a close fit, that do, as you say, have a lot of the requirements that we're talking about, things that can be done at the community level, what have you. And it's a matter of first of finding them, and secondly, being ready to apply, and third, being ready to have the partnership that can help negotiate to get the outcome, so that they don't wrap you around the axle. They don't say that you don't have any of the qualifications, or we're going to give the money over here instead. I would think that if we put a little attention on this at Rutgers and elsewhere, we could really change the rate at which money happen, and secondly, change the rate at which things happen because the money got spent, the things you're trying to get done. It won't be perfect, but it'll be better than the situation where there isn't that kind of coaching available. But with respect to the other thing you had to say, Lucia, about other water-related issues like stormwater management, runoff, and so these things are all related. And that's why any of the things that are sort of ecosystem health related offer you an opportunity here. There's also a number of consent decrees across New Jersey on the Clean Water Act. And because water is still going where it's not supposed to anymore. It's getting discharged directly into open rivers and streams and lakes. And that's supposed to stop. And also because so many of these systems were built as combined sewer systems instead of separated ones. And, you know, some of them, there might be enough money now to separate, but then it won't happen instantly. And this means turning your attention to stopping rainwater from going into systems. So that part of it sounds a little bit more like the 1930s New Deal. I mean, what would a network look like for helping communities re-landscape their areas, particularly in urban areas where too much is paved? And I think there's wonderful projects going on around the country. There's something in Louisville called the Green Heart of Louisville, where two cardiologists of all people came up with a fantastic idea for accelerating tree canopy restoration, something that's an issue in Newark, I know. And because they wanted to do measurements on how much better respiratory health was when there was a dense tree canopy. And they didn't want to wait 30 years for trees to grow up. So what they did was they raised $30 million in a joint project with the Nature Conservancy and some other parties. And they're almost done transplanting 1,200 mature trees from all over Kentucky and adjacent states. Trees get chopped down all the time. Get chopped down and just maintaining parks. I'll bet you that area by your reservoir, trees get
Yes, it's interesting because Elliot was saying before that the city of Newark already owns 35,000 acres of forest.
Right. No, and so if you think of it as a tree sharing program in current labeling, you know, people might get it. So it's a fantastic project. Within 5 years, they'll have a dense tree canopy back in the 6 forest neighborhoods in Louisville, Kentucky. And then that'll keep the community happy in terms of benefits and co-benefits. And it'll keep the medical community happy because they'll finally have something they could measure with valid results. It could keep EPA ecstatic because it means that they could do a complete green infrastructure and heat island mitigation plan. And finally, it's a great economic development program. It's going to employ a lot of people just to get all the trees planted and maintained and so forth. And you could be doing that regionally too. You're going to need to. I do a lot of mapping on climate risk and how quickly things are changing. And, you know, we coded the whole United States in various shades of red, green, and yellow. And almost all the counties in New Jersey are shaded some shade of red. I mean, heat is increasing faster, rain's increasing faster. You don't always get a hurricane, but you always get winds, and winds can drive water and snow into dangerous situations. There's a lot of things you have to deal with. I happen to think it's a lovely climate and a great place, but if you're going to deal with risk up front, I think you're going to have to deal with all those issues together, and that's a great opportunity. So I think some analysis could help in sketching those out. You know, what else do we need to do to make your communities ready to be able to then go for this sort of scenario? I mean, what I heard, let me hear if I got this right. There's a role to figure out how to connect the dots, both between these different issues that are water related and different parts of the region that may be related to each other, as in the case of the headwaters to the tap idea, which I think is terrific. You know, second, I heard that there may be a role for citizen science in all this, because at the end of the day, if people aren't getting healthier, there's a real problem. You know, third, I'll just stipulate there's going to be a role for workforce development in this. because bringing all this money in, I mean, the whole world, it's front page news. We're short of a trained workforce in so many areas right now. There is money for employment and training in these bills. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for both community-based workforce developers and for the community colleges to work together, since they all have those programs, and make this a focus area. And I think there's also a role for better communications and engagement. I think it needs to be somebody's role to make sure that anytime public policies getting made and programs are getting developed, that the right people are involved in them, and then that performance is monitored. So you can sort of fix anything that's not working right. If it was a corporation, they would say, of course, that's called continuous improvement. Whenever it gets into public affairs, people say, huh? But, I guarantee if we don't hold public investing to that same level of accountability, you can expect it to not perform. All right, what else do we need to get focused here in our little scenario? Am I getting the sense of this right?
Well, no, I was going to say in less than a minute, we'll be switched back into the
Right.
other group.
Bigger group, right? Yeah. Okay. Is this helpful to get these kinds of ideas?
Yes.
I'll be giving my email out in the next presentation in the big group too, and I'm happy to do some informal coaching with people until we get a real program started. But there's some tremendous case study work that's available on how to do this, and I could point you in the right direction. Otherwise, all right.
I think we
Thanks.
need to
Great
talk
to meet
again.
everybody.
Yeah,
you
thank
bet.
you for your insight.